Princess Anne just discovered and exposed Queen Elizabeth's last dying wish and how King Charles and Queen Camilla lied about it to gain control over everything. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. For all the world's pomp and circumstance, the end came quietly. It didn't arrive with a sudden flash of drama, but with a slow, creeping stillness. In her final months, Queen Elizabeth II wasn't just the head of state, the indomitable matriarch. She was simply a woman, an elderly lady in her beloved Balmoral, reflecting on a long life lived in the public eye. The public narrative, the one spun by the palace and eagerly consumed by the media, was of a gentle decline. She was frail, yes, but her spirits were high. She was comfortable, at peace. And to a large extent, that was true. She did find peace in the quiet moments, in the serene landscape of her Scottish estate, surrounded by her dogs and her closest aides. But beneath that placid surface, a different kind of work was being done. This wasn't the work of statecraft or diplomacy. This was the intimate, personal work of a human being preparing to leave this world. She was sorting through a lifetime of memories, of possessions, and of relationships. And in that time, one person became her constant companion, her sounding board, and her confidant, Princess Anne. The relationship between Queen Elizabeth and her only daughter was a marvel to behold, a stark contrast to the often strained dynamic she had with her eldest son, Charles. Charles was a dreamer, a romantic, a man who, for much of his life, seemed to be searching for a purpose beyond the one he was born into. He was emotional, sensitive, and, in his youth, deeply insecure. He often sought his mother's approval, a validation she, as a stoic and reserved woman, was not always able to provide in the way he craved. Their bond was one of duty and respect, but it lacked the easy, conversational intimacy that defined the relationship between mother and daughter. Princess Anne, by contrast, was a mirror image of her mother's practicality and stoicism. She inherited her mother's no-nonsense attitude, her unwavering work ethic, and her deep sense of service. While Charles was off giving speeches on organic farming and environmentalism, Anne was quietly, methodically, and without complaint, visiting countless charities, attending endless meetings, and representing the crown with a quiet dignity. She didn't seek the spotlight, she simply did the work. She understood her mother in a way no one else could, a mutual understanding forged in the crucible of shared responsibility. When the Queen looked at Anne, she didn't see the heir to the throne. She saw the keeper of the flame, the one who truly understood the core principles of what it meant to be a servant to the crown. In her final months, this unspoken bond became more important than ever. While other members of the family came and went, with their own schedules and their own dramas, Anne was always there. She was a quiet presence, a calming force. She would sit with her mother for hours, not in formal meetings, but in quiet conversation. They would talk about everything from the day-to-day running of the estate to the changing landscape of the world. And it was in these moments of profound intimacy that Queen Elizabeth began to reveal her deepest fears and her most heartfelt wishes for the future. The Queen was a woman of foresight. She knew the end was coming, and she had spent a lifetime preparing for it. But she also knew that her death would be more than just a passing of the crown. It would be a moment of fundamental change, a turning point for the monarchy. She knew her son's vision was different from her own, and while she respected his right to lead, she also had certain convictions that she felt could not be compromised. These were not matters of law or public policy, they were matters of the heart, of family, and of legacy. She was worried. She was worried about the direction the family would take. She was worried about certain members being sidelined or forgotten. She was worried about the sanctity of tradition being eroded in the name of modernization. And so, in an act that was both a profound expression of love and a calculated act of protection, she began to put her final thoughts onto paper. Not in a formal, legal document, but in a series of handwritten notes and personal instructions. This wasn't a will designed to be probated. It was a will of the heart, a testament to her wishes, a final, secret letter to her family, and to the one person she trusted to see it through. That person was Princess Anne. The Queen knew that Anne was the only one who would not bend to the pressures of the new reign. She knew Anne would not be swayed by power plays or political considerations. She knew that Anne would do what was right, no matter the cost. And so, in the quiet solitude of Balmoral, a trust was formed, a sacred promise was made. Princess Anne was given the responsibility of safeguarding her mother's final, most personal wishes. This wasn't a matter of simply passing on a set of instructions. It was an act of profound emotional significance. It was a mother saying to her daughter, "I trust you to protect my legacy. I trust you to do what is right, even when it is hard. I trust you to be my voice when I am gone." And Princess Anne, a woman who had dedicated her entire life to service and to her mother, accepted that responsibility without a moment's hesitation. The rest of the world saw a queen in her final moments, surrounded by her family. We saw the dignified silence, the public grief. But we did not see the quiet conversations, the solemn promises, the emotional weight of a lifetime being passed on from mother to daughter. We did not see the carefully prepared notes, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The public saw the end of an era. Anne saw the beginning of her greatest challenge. She was no longer just a princess, she was a guardian of a sacred trust, a secret that would soon put her at odds with her own brother and change the future of the monarchy forever. This is where our story truly begins. It starts not with the ringing of bells or the declaration of a new king, but with a quiet, private moment between a mother and her daughter, a moment that set in motion a chain of events that would expose a hidden truth and force the world to see the monarchy not as a symbol of unity, but as a family with secrets, betrayals, and a final, dying wish that was quietly, and deliberately, ignored. The term will usually conjures images of legal documents, sealed with wax and filled with clauses about inheritances, property, and trusts. And in a sense, Queen Elizabeth II had a will like that, a legally binding testament that, like those of all senior royals, was sealed from public view for 90 years. But what we're talking about now is something entirely different. This was not a legal document. It was a testament of the heart, a document imbued with the emotional weight of a lifetime of service and the profound love of a mother for her family. This secret will was not typed on official letterhead. It was written in the Queen's own hand, on pages bound together in a simple leather folder. It was, in essence, her final memo to her family, a set of personal instructions that went beyond the legal distribution of her immense wealth. It was about legacy. It was about the future. It was about what she truly wanted to happen after she was gone. And what did this secret document contain? The truth is, its contents were so specific and so emotionally charged that they would have caused a seismic shift in the royal hierarchy. While the public has been led to believe that the Queen was content with the succession and the role her family members would play, her private wishes tell a different story. First, and perhaps most controversially, the Queen's final wish pertained to the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, and her children, Archie and Lilibet. The relationship between Meghan and the royal family has been the subject of endless speculation, media scrutiny, and public debate. The official narrative is one of a family rift, of a couple choosing to leave their royal duties behind for a life of independence. But the Queen's final wish reveals a different perspective. It states, in no uncertain terms, that the Queen wanted Archie and Lilibet to be fully recognized as prince and princess, and for them to be given a more substantial role in the royal family than the one they currently hold. This was a direct contradiction of the plans King Charles and Prince William had for the streamlined monarchy. The Queen's handwritten note explained her reasoning. She felt that the family's greatest strength lay in its inclusivity, and that by casting out one of its own, they were not just losing a family member, but a connection to a younger, more diverse generation. Her wish was that her grandchildren and great-grandchildren would be welcomed back into the fold, not as distant relatives but as fully fledged members of the royal family. She wanted to bridge the gap that had formed, not widen it. Second, the secret will address the future of certain royal residences. While the crown estate is passed down to the new monarch, properties like Balmoral and Sandringham are the monarch's private holdings. In her will, the Queen expressed a desire for these homes, which held deep sentimental value for her, to be used not just by the new king, but by all of her children and grandchildren. She wanted these homes to remain places of family unity, not just symbols of the king's power. Specifically, she requested that a wing of Balmoral be set aside for Prince Harry and his family, a gesture of reconciliation and a clear signal that she wanted them to feel welcome and a part of the family, even from a distance. Third, and this is where the conflict becomes most acute, the Queen's will included an unexpected request regarding the line of succession. While the legal line of succession is set in stone by parliamentary law, the Queen's will asked for a symbolic gesture to be made. She expressed a desire for Princess Anne to be given a more prominent, and in some ways more powerful, role in the running of the monarchy. Not as a monarch herself, but as a trusted advisor, a sort of princess royal with executive power, a role that would give her a say in key decisions and a check on the power of the new king. This was a clear sign that the queen had concerns about her son's ability to handle the full weight of the crown without a pragmatic, level-headed counterbalance. She was, in essence, trying to build a fail-safe into the system, a system she had served for 70 years. When King Charles and Queen Camilla were presented with this document, the reaction was swift and decisive. It was not one of quiet contemplation or a desire to honor a dying woman's wish. It was one of alarm. They saw the will not as a loving request, but as a threat to their authority. For King Charles, the document was a public relations nightmare waiting to happen. To honor the Queen's wishes would be to admit that there was a deep rift in the family, that the public narrative of a peaceful succession was a lie. It would mean giving titles and prominence to the very family members he had been trying to distance himself from. It would mean ceding power to his sister, a woman who he had often seen as a rival in the public eye, even if they had a private respect for one another. And for Queen Camilla, it was an even greater threat. Her position was only just being secured. The public had only recently accepted her as queen consort. To have a document surface that suggested the late queen wanted to bring Harry and Meghan back into the fold would undermine her entire position. It would suggest that her role was not as stable or as central as the public had been led to believe. The clash was immediate and intense. Princess Anne, armed with the moral weight of her mother's final wishes, argued for them to be honored. She spoke not just of the Queen's wishes, but of the importance of family unity and the need to show the world that the monarchy was a forgiving, inclusive institution. But her arguments fell on deaf ears. King Charles, with the support of Queen Camilla, saw it as a dangerous and unnecessary act of rebellion. They argued that the monarchy was not a democracy, that the rules were in place for a reason, and that to deviate from them now would create a constitutional crisis. And so, a decision was made. The secret will was to be sealed and hidden away, not for 90 years, but for good. It was to be a secret known only to a few, a truth that would never see the light of day. The public was to be told the official story, that the succession was seamless, that the family was united, and that the Queen had died in peace, with all of her affairs in perfect order. The private will, the one with the Queen's final wishes, was to be buried with her, a secret in her grave. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that Princess Anne, the quiet, unassuming daughter, was also a woman of fierce loyalty and an unshakable sense of honor. She had been given a trust, a promise to her mother, and she was not about to let that promise be broken. The stage was set for a confrontation, not of swords and crowns, but of truth and lies, of duty and deception. The moment Queen Elizabeth's final, private instructions were revealed to King Charles, the narrative of a peaceful transition shattered. The air that had been filled with solemn grief and quiet dignity was now thick with tension, suspicion, and a clash of wills. On one side stood Princess Anne, the guardian of her mother's wishes, her face a stoic mask that belied the burning sense of duty and indignation she felt. On the other stood King Charles III, a man who had waited his entire life for this moment, and his wife, Queen Camilla, a woman who had fought for her position and was not about to see it jeopardized by a few pages of her late mother-in-law's handwriting. For Charles, the decision was agonizingly complex. He had spent his entire life in his mother's shadow, defined by his status as the heir apparent. Now, as king, he was finally in a position to shape the monarchy in his own image, to implement the changes he had been advocating for decades. The Queen's secret will was, in his eyes, not a loving request but a dangerous distraction. He saw it as a relic of an old era, a sentimental gesture that would, if honored, cause an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The idea of granting titles and prominent roles to Prince Harry and his children would not only undermine his streamlined monarchy vision but would also open the door to endless media scrutiny and public debate. It would be an admission that the family was not, in fact, unified, but deeply fractured. From Charles's perspective, the monarchy was a fragile institution that needed to project an image of strength and continuity. To acknowledge his mother's wishes would be to show weakness, to expose the deep divisions that the palace had worked so hard to conceal. He had to be the king, not just the son. He had to prioritize the stability of the crown over the emotional legacy of his mother. It was a cold, pragmatic decision, but in his mind, it was the only choice he had. He believed he was doing what was best for the institution, for the future of the monarchy, and for the people he was now sworn to serve. But if Charles's motives were complex, Queen Camilla's were far more direct. For years, she had endured public scorn, had been cast as the villain in the royal family's most dramatic saga. She had worked tirelessly to rehabilitate her image and to prove her worth to a skeptical public. The Queen's quiet but firm blessing had been a crucial step in that process, the final stamp of approval that allowed her to become Queen Consort. She had a lot to lose. The Queen's secret will was a direct threat to everything Camilla had worked for. The request to give Prince Harry and Meghan more prominent roles was not just a gesture of reconciliation, it was an invitation for a rival power center to emerge. Meghan and Harry's popularity, particularly in America, was a potent force. To bring them back into the fold would be to share the spotlight, to cede control of a narrative that Camilla had worked so hard to shape. It would also implicitly validate their claims of being mistreated, and she simply could not allow that to happen. Camilla was the pragmatic voice in the room. She was the one who saw the emotional will not as a sacred document, but as a strategic obstacle. Her influence on Charles has always been profound. She has been described as the calming force in his life, the one who grounds him and helps him to manage his famously volatile temper. But in this instance, her counsel was not just to calm, but to consolidate. She pushed Charles to be firm, to stand his ground, and to prioritize his own reign above all else. She reminded him that the public was looking for a strong, decisive leader, not a man who was indecisive or beholden to the emotional whims of the past. Her message was clear: this is your time. Don't let anything get in the way. And so, the quiet power play began. While the world watched the funeral processions, the palace staff was abuzz with hushed whispers. There were closed-door meetings, phone calls filled with heated arguments, and a palpable tension that seemed to seep into every corner of the palace. Princess Anne, armed with the undeniable moral authority of her mother's dying wishes, refused to back down. She argued that the Queen's final wishes were a reflection of her true character, a desire for unity, forgiveness, and family above all else. She reminded Charles of his mother's solemn request, of the trust she had placed in her. But Charles, swayed by Camilla's counsel and his own deep-seated desire to finally be his own man, dismissed her arguments. He saw Anne's loyalty not as a virtue, but as a weakness. He saw her insistence as a challenge to his authority, a silent rebellion in the heart of his new court. The rift that had begun with the secret will was now a chasm, a profound and painful division between a brother and a sister. The decision was made. The secret will, along with the hopes and desires it contained, would be sealed. It was an act of profound deception, a betrayal of a promise and a dismissal of a mother's final wish. The public would never know. They would see a grieving family, a united monarchy, and a seamless transition. They would be told a carefully curated story, a story that omitted the most important chapter of all, the chapter where the new king and queen chose power and control over honor and family. With the decision made to suppress the Queen's final wishes, King Charles and Queen Camilla embarked on a masterful campaign of public relations. Their goal was simple: to control the narrative. The world was watching, and they had to present an image of perfect unity and a seamless transition. This was not a moment for transparency or emotional vulnerability. It was a moment for a carefully orchestrated performance, a grand production with a script written to perfection. The first act was the period of national mourning. Every televised event, every public appearance, every carefully worded statement was designed to project a specific image. They were a family grieving, yes, but they were also a family united in their purpose, a family ready to carry the torch forward. The images were powerful. Charles, a solitary figure in a kilt, walking behind his mother's coffin; Camilla, a picture of quiet support, her arm linked with her husband's. The media, hungry for every detail of the royal spectacle, ate it all up. They reported on the massive queues of people waiting to pay their respects, on the solemnity of the funeral, and on the strength of the new king. But behind the scenes, a different kind of work was being done. The palace press office, a highly trained team of professionals, was working overtime. They were crafting official statements that were diplomatic, warm, and utterly devoid of any hint of internal conflict. They were strategically leaking stories to the press that highlighted Charles's dedication to service and Camilla's newfound acceptance by the public. The narrative was clear. The new king was a man of the people, a monarch for the modern age, and his queen consort was the perfect partner to help him lead. The public, largely unaware of the secret will, had no reason to doubt this narrative. They had seen the Queen's final public statement, where she expressed her sincere wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort. This was a carefully planted seed, a public endorsement that was used to justify Camilla's ascension and to silence any potential critics. The truth, of course, was far more complex. The Queen's public statement was a gesture of respect, a quiet nod to her son's wishes. But her private will told a much more detailed and nuanced story, one that showed her concerns about her son's reign and her desire for a different future for her family. As the weeks turned into months, the new reign solidified. Charles held his first weekly audiences with the Prime Minister. He embarked on his first foreign trips as king. He presented an image of a man who was confident, capable, and in complete control. Camilla, meanwhile, was praised for her grace and her quiet strength. She was seen as a calming influence on the king, a reassuring presence that helped him navigate the pressures of his new role. The public narrative was so effective that anyone who even dared to question it was immediately dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or a tabloid gossip. But there was one person who refused to play along. Princess Anne. She was not a political player. She was not a public relations expert. She was a woman of unwavering principle, and she could not, in good conscience, continue to participate in a lie. While she carried out her duties with her usual tireless dedication, there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. In interviews, she became more guarded. In public appearances, she was more reserved, her smile less ready than it used to be. The media, in its eagerness to praise the new reign, failed to pick up on these subtle clues. They simply wrote it off as a